Welcome to Conspiracy Deconstructed. Today, we are heading to the high, remote foothills of the French Pyrenees.
To a very small, very quiet village called Rennes-le-Chateau.
And this place, well, it's the center of a story that starts with a local priest's sudden, baffling fortune in the late 19th century.
And somehow, over the next 100 years, it grows into this massive, multi-layered myth.
A myth that would eventually launch a global publishing phenomenon, selling millions and millions of books, and of course, inspiring blockbuster movies.
Right. And the central figure in all this, the man at the heart of the real-life historical riddle, is Abbe Vinci Sauniere.
He was a small-time priest who somehow, some way, ended up with big-time wealth.
So our mission today is to really unpack this incredible stack of sources we've got. We have everything from actual ecclesiastical financial records,
all the way to detailed analysis of these supposedly ancient coded parchments.
Exactly. We are going to rigorously separate the verifiable historical truth, which is, the minor mystery of Sauniere's cache, from the huge modern 20th century fictional hoax that gave us the whole Merovingian bloodline theory.
Our journey is going to take us from a dusty church altar all the way to the Vatican and then straight through, it seems, the forgery workshops of the 1960s.
We really need to move past the compelling narrative, the story everyone wants to believe,
and land firmly on what the evidence and the sources we've gathered actually support. So let's start with the legend. Let's hear it in its most dramatic, its most compelling form. This is the one that grips millions of imaginations, the narrative that drives the bestsellers.
Okay, so picture the scene. It's the late 19th century. Rennes-le-Chateau is, it's poverty-stricken. It's remote, forgotten.
And its priest, Abbe Vinci Sauniere, is desperately poor. He's struggling just to maintain his duties, let alone the dilapidated Church of St. Mary Magdalene.
So necessity forces him to begin a simple renovation of the church. This is a humble task. The roof is failing. The interior is literally crumbling.
But according to the legend, during this work, specifically when he's moving the main altar,
an altar which rests on what are described as these ancient Visigothic stone pillars,
he discovers a small cache.
And what he supposedly finds inside changes absolutely everything.
He doesn't just find, gold coins or some old jewelry. He finds documents, ancient parchments, scrolls.
And these documents are said to contain a secret so profound, so devastating, that it would completely undermine the 2,000-year-old foundational myth of Christianity.
The secret.
The secret is that Jesus Christ did not die celibate on the cross, that he was, in fact, married to Mary Magdalene.
And goes further than that.
Oh, much further.
Yeah.
That they had children, and that those children established a verifiable, traceable royal bloodline.
The Sauniere.
The royal blood, exactly, which was then, the story goes, merged with the French Merovingian dynasty. If this were true, it would turn the entire historical narrative of the church completely upside down.
So the theory then claims that Sauniere, who's now holding the keys to the greatest secret in Western history, he doesn't go to historians or theologians.
No, not at all. He immediately recognizes its immense transactional value.
He blackmails the ultimate power structure?
The Vatican itself. He threatens to expose the truth unless he's paid an astronomical fortune to ensure his silence.
And he gets it.
He gets the fortune. And he uses this sudden illicit wealth, this money obtained by holding the church hostage, not just to live lavishly, but to transform his tiny, isolated village into a personal monument.
He rebuilds his parish into this ostentatious estate, a cryptic, symbol-laden complex.
A sort of cathedral of coded messages, designed supposedly to secretly broadcast his heretical knowledge to future generations of initiates.
People who knew how to look and how to decode what they were seeing.
And that is the core belief. He found the ultimate truth, and he paid for it with the ultimate crime of historical blackmail.
That is a truly sensational story, but okay, we need to step back and ask.
Right.
Where does the verifiable historical truth end, and where does all this speculation begin? What was the actual kernel of fact here?
The actual kernel is the priest and his money.
Okay.
That part's real. The story begins in 1885, when François Béranger Sauniere arrives at Rennes-le-Chateau.
And what do we know about him?
He came from a very conservative monarchist background. He was known to be a staunch anti-republican, which is actually important context for some of the symbols he later chose for the church.
And the church itself.
The church was, by all accounts, a complete disaster. Dilapidated and neglected, just falling apart.
So he arrives poor, and the church is crumbling. But our sources confirm that by around 1897, his financial status had abruptly and, quote, unaccountably abated.
Right. He was suddenly spending vast amounts of money, far, far more than a simple village priest could ever have.
And this is the verifiable, genuine mystery that launched 1,000 theories.
This is it. Where did the cash come from?
The spending spree was pretty remarkable for a man in his position.
It really was. And it coincided with the renovation of the church altar, which, as the legend suggests, did involve moving an old flagstone and those Visigothic pillars beneath it.
So he probably did find something.
It's very likely he found something, probably some old coins, maybe a few low-value artifacts, which gave him his initial seed money. But his later spending was just immense.
He didn't just spend it on fixing the roof, did he?
No, he went straight into conspicuous consumption, ostentatious building projects. We see him buying up all the surrounding land.
But doing it exclusively in the name of his longtime housekeeper, Marie Denarnaud.
A very clear attempt to obscure the paper trail, right? To shield the assets from any kind of ecclesiastical inspection.
So he builds his personal estate, Villa Bethania.
Which was incredibly luxurious for that area. He created a fine promenade. He even built these elaborate greenhouses just so he could grow exotic oranges in a remote mountain climate.
And of course, the mysterious Tour Magdala.
His library tower, built right on the edge of a precipice. The sources all confirm this lavish, inexplicable lifestyle began right around the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And that is the only original historical mystery. The source of his funds.
So we have a historical puzzle, a rich, evasive priest. But that doesn't equal a global bloodline conspiracy. When did this local curiosity start its metamorphosis into a world-shattering secret?
Oh, decades later. And it starts with pure commerce. Sauniere died in 1917, and his financial secrets, they passed to Marie Denarnaud.
And she refused to divulge them before her own death.
Took them to her grave. Then, in the 1940s, a local businessman named Noël Corbu purchased the Sauniere estate, the Villa Bethania.
But Corbu had a problem. The village of Rennes-le-Chateau was, and is, incredibly isolated.
There's just no easy way to turn this sprawling, eccentric estate into a successful hotel business. How do you draw tourists to the absolute middle of nowhere?
You invent a sensational origin story.
You do. Corbu had heard all the local gossip, the persistent rumors that always surrounded Sauniere's money. In 1956, he took this historical kernel and he fabricated a treasure story.
And he presented it in an interview with a regional newspaper, La Dépêche du Midi.
That's the one. He went public with it.
And what was his specific invented treasure? What did he claim Sauniere found?
He claimed Sauniere had discovered the vast hidden treasure of Louis VIII's wife, Blanche de Castile. He even put a number on it.
How much?
18 million francs.
And our sources make it clear that this story was entirely without historical foundation.
Completely. There is zero evidence that this specific treasure ever existed, let alone that Blanche de Castile would have secreted it away in this tiny mountain village.
So it was just a marketing ploy.
It was a calculated business scheme designed purely to generate curiosity and, well, hotel reservations. This is a crucial point. The modern mystery, even at its very earliest stage, is rooted in a fabrication for commercial profit.
Okay, so Corbu's story, while it might have been successful locally, then became the raw material for something much bigger.
For a far more ambitious fraud, orchestrated by a man named Pierre Plantard.
Plantard was a very peculiar individual, wasn't he? He had these grand monarchist aspirations.
That's right. In 1956, he legally founded an organization called the Priory of Sion, the Priory of Sion in Annemasse, France.
But when you look at the original charter for that group, it's completely benign.
It's almost boring. It was a fraternal organization focused on mutual aid, producing a little bulletin about affordable housing.
Hardly a shadowy, thousand-year-old cabal pulling the strings of history.
No, that quickly became too mundane for Plantard. So in the 1960s, he began to retrofit his little organization with a fictitious ancient history.
He claimed the priory was actually founded in 1099 by Godfrey of Bouillon, the crusading knight.
And the ultimate goal of this fabricated history was very specific, restoring the Merovingian dynasty to power in France.
And this is where the hoax becomes really insidious. Plantard needed historical proof to make his claims stick.
So he and his associate, a man named Philippe de Cherizet, they systematically fabricated that evidence. They created what are known as the Dossiers Secrets d'Henri Lobineau.
The secret files.
A series of documents that purportedly established the Merovingian lineage all the way down to, conveniently, Plantard himself.
And here's the genius and the sheer audacity of the scam.
They didn't just keep these documents in a shoebox.
No, they forged them, and then they deposited copies at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris, the French National Library.
This crucial step, lodging them in a legitimate, verifiable public archive, was intended to lend the entire fictitious lineage an air of undeniable credibility.
So when researchers inevitably found them, they'd look real.
They'd look like a genuine historical discovery. And they also forged the medieval-looking parchments, the ones supposedly found by Sauniere inside that hollow pillar.
Right, the treasure maps to the secret.
Then Plantard collaborated with an author named Gérard de Sède on the 1967 book L'Or de Rennes, The Gold of Rennes.
And that book publicized these forged parchments, cementing the link between the historical Sauniere mystery and Plantard's manufactured secret society for the first time in public.
So now we have this historical puzzle that's been turned into a hotel pitch, which was then seized upon by a monarchist hoaxer trying to prove he was descended from forgotten French royalty.
But how did we make the incredible jump from Merovingian kings to Jesus Christ?
That leap was made by three Englishmen. A man named Henry Lincoln, an English scriptwriter. He became absolutely fascinated by de Sède's book.
And he found one of the coded messages referencing Dagobert II, king, and to Sion belongs this treasure.
Right, and Dagobert II, you have to remember, was an assassinated Merovingian king. So the link was there.
Lincoln then teamed up with two other authors, Michael Bagent and Richard Lee.
And critically, these authors relied heavily on Plantard's forgeries, the dossier secrets. They believed them to be authentic, centuries-old documents that proved the Priory's true history.
So they weren't the forgers, but they were using forged material as their primary source text.
Exactly. And they took Plantard's core premise, this desire to restore the Merovingian line, and they reinterpreted it through a much deeper, more profound biblical lens.
They fused the royal Merovingian line with the Davidic lineage of Christ.
The result was the book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, published in 1982. This book declared that the Holy Grail was not a literal cup,
but the Sang Royal,
a royal blood. The Grail they proposed was the sacred vessel of Mary Magdalene's womb, and the Priory of Sion was the ancient society protecting the lineal descendants of Jesus and Magdalene.
This was the moment. This was when the regional French hoax became a global religious conspiracy.
And then 21 years later, this exact thesis, this specific interpretation, was borrowed. It was even explicitly cited as fact in the introduction.
And made universally famous by Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code in 2003.
It's just an incredible chain of events. A priest's fraud, a hotelier's lie, a hoaxer's ambition, and finally, a publishing empire built on the back of all three.
Okay, before we bring in the factual hammer, we really need to understand the believer's perspective.
We do. Proponents of this conspiracy, they're often called concordists, and they argue that Sauniere's elaborate construction was a message system, a coded confession hidden in plain sight.
So let's walk through the three most compelling pieces of so-called evidence, and let's present them charitably, allowing the visual and symbolic arguments to speak for themselves.
Let's start with the church. If you walk into the Church of St. Mary Magdalene today, the first thing that hits you is just the sheer oddity of the decorations.
It feels less like a place of worship and more like, I don't know, a room designed to disorient you.
Absolutely. And the centerpiece of this initial shock is the holy water font. Supporting the basin, kneeling on the ground, is a startling statue of a red-horned winged demon, Asmodeus.
Most visitors, and you can understand why, ask, why is a statue of the demon Asmodeus, the destroyer of marriages, supporting the holy water font at the entrance of a church?
Right, and proponents argue this is the first clear signal. They claim Asmodeus is, in Jewish lore, the guardian of secret places and hidden riches.
Specifically, the treasure of Solomon's temple.
So his placement here confirms the priest was signaling that he held a profound secret, or that he had discovered a great treasure.
The symbolic clues continue above that. Over the entrance, Sauniere had a Latin inscription placed, Terribilis est locus iste.
Now, it's a common phrase, but proponents interpret it very dramatically. They choose the modern translation. This place is terrible.
Suggesting a dark, menacing secret, or maybe even a curse on the site rather than, say, awe-inspiring.
Exactly. Then you move into the nave, and the statues of the saints are laid out in a highly specific pattern.
Concordists analyze the first letters of the names of these statues. St. Anthony, St. Roche, St. Mary Magdalene, St. James, and others.
And the theory is that if you connect the first letters in a highly specific M shape, Mary Magdalene's initial, you can spell out Graal, the French word for Grail.
That's a remarkable feat of decryption, but we should note that one of the required letters, the L for Graal, has to be found somewhere else.
It does. It has to be borrowed from one of the church's scattered bas-reliefs. Still, the visual claim is that Sauniere deliberately arranged these medieval-style statues to broadcast the secret identity of the Grail, which is the bloodline.
They argue this degree of specific arrangement just cannot be accidental.
Then you have the altar bas-reliefs. These are said to hold profound esoteric clues, particularly the image showing Mary Magdalene kneeling in a cave.
Proponents point to details that seem almost too subtle to be a coincidence.
Like a flowering vine, shaped precisely like a cross, that grows from the earth before her. This is interpreted as signaling a bloodline lineage that stems from Christ himself.
Furthermore, some researchers, like Margaret Starbird, they focus on her hands, where her fingers are folded into 3 distinct X shapes.
Which is cited as a classic esoteric signal of significant concealed knowledge. The visual argument is overwhelming if you're a believer. The church is a museum of intentional heretical symbolism.
Okay, but the core physical evidence for the entire bloodline thesis has to be the documents, right? The small and large parchments, allegedly found inside that hollow Visigothic pillar.
Yes, the parchments are key. And the clues the encrypted messages supposedly contained are what set Henry Lincoln on his path.
He famously popularized the decoded message, which tied the whole affair back to royalty.
To Dagobert II, king, and to Sion belongs this treasure, and he is there dead. It explicitly links the treasure and the secret to the Priory of Sion and the assassinated Merovingian lineage.
But maybe the most compelling part for theological proponents is a phrase that was embedded at the bottom of the Great Parchment.
A phrase taken from the church's own altar inscription. Jesu medella vulnerum, per Magdalene lacrimas peccata nostra diluas.
Which, translated, states that Christ is the remedy against our pains and our sins are washed away.
Thanks to Magdalene's tears. Proponents argue that this is the ultimate heresy in plain Latin. By linking the power of salvation and the washing away of sins directly to Mary Magdalene's tears, rather than solely to Christ's sacrifice on the cross, it elevates her role to that of a co-redeemer.
Which is completely against Orthodox Catholic doctrine. It's a powerful statement of her equal importance.
And as a final little flourish, the bottom of that great parchment features the inverted word noi,
which, when you hold it up to a mirror, clearly spells S-I-O-N.
a direct reference to the secret society protecting this truth. If you believe these documents are authentic, it's pretty undeniable proof.
Concordists also argue that Sauniere's entire complex, everything he built, was a kind of homage to Mary Magdalene, confirming her divine importance.
Right. Every part of his estate, the church, his personal grotto, and the tower, was dedicated to her.
The Tour Magdala, his library, is seen as the visual key.
Its name, the Tower of the Magdalene, is multi-layered. It references Magdalene herself, her birthplace Magdala, and even the Aramaic word for tower, Migdal.
And the construction seems to be deliberately numerological.
Yes, the numbers 22 and 7 are often emphasized. There are 22 steps leading to the platform connecting the tower, and another 22 steps inside the tower's spiral staircase.
And 22 is, of course, the feast day of St. Mary Magdalene, July 22nd.
So this is interpreted as a clear, innocent homage to the saint on one level, but also a specific marker for initiates on another.
But the real clincher for many believers is the precise sightline from that tower.
The window of the Tour Magdala, perched there on the cliff edge, is fixed directly and exactly on a specific distant location.
A grotto known locally as the Grotta du Forne di la Magdalene.
Literally the burial site of the Magdalene. And ancient burial remains have been found there, which lends some credence to the idea that this site was significant to Sauniere.
This geographical link even extends further, doesn't it?
It does. Researchers have suggested that this Rock of the Magdalene, a highly distinctive stone platform in the nearby Vallée des Couleurs, the stream of colors or tears, has been secretly commemorated in classical European art for centuries.
They point specifically to Nicolas Poussin's famous painting, The Shepherds of Arcadia.
Claiming the landscape in the painting perfectly matches the specific geological formations around Rennes-le-Chateau.
The implication being that Poussin, a purported Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, was also an initiate who knew about the secret burial site.
So the visual evidence, if you accept all the premises, is incredibly suggestive.
Okay, that is a dense, emotionally charged, and highly symbolic collection of evidence. We have symbols, ciphers, hidden landscapes, an astronomical fortune.
Now it's time to apply the rigor of factual investigation and the historical record.
Let's start with the central engine of the whole conspiracy, Sauniere's wealth. Was he blackmailing the Vatican?
The blackmail theory falls apart almost instantly when we look at the ecclesiastical records.
Why is that?
Well, if the Vatican was paying Sauniere off to keep the ultimate secret, why would the church then actively pursue him, investigate him, and ultimately strip him of his title? It makes no sense.
That is the critical flaw in the conspiracy's logic. In 1908, Bishop de Beausejour began a formal investigation into the priest's unaccountable wealth.
And that investigation didn't find ancient secrets or Merovingian tombs.
What did it find?
Simple, common financial fraud, but on an absolutely industrial scale. In 1915, Sauniere was stripped of his title on charges of trafficking in masses.
And the sources confirm this is the single most verifiable explanation for his money.
It is. And for those unfamiliar with what trafficking in masses entails, this was essentially a mail-order spiritual Ponzi scheme.
Can you explain that?
A mass stipend is a small payment a Catholic faithful gives to a priest to dedicate a mass to the intention of a deceased loved one.
And Sauniere placed advertisements in Catholic magazines all over France.
And into Europe, yes, requesting these stipends. He was receiving massive payments, sometimes 50, 100, even 200 francs per request, promising to say masses for the souls of the departed.
But the sources show he received literally thousands upon thousands of these mass requests.
Far more masses than any single priest could possibly say in a lifetime.
All right.
10 lifetimes.
So the records show he logged vast amounts of cash income, all derived from these stipends.
He was a highly successful, large-scale financial fraudster, not a mystical treasure hunter. This confirmed act of fraud, which was thoroughly documented by the church's own investigation, provides the simplest, most logical explanation for his cash influx. It's a perfect fit for Occam's razor.
Sauniere was rich not because he found the truth, but because he successfully exploited the spiritual beliefs of thousands of grieving Catholics.
And furthermore, the financial records at the time of his death in 1917, they dispel this notion that he was sitting on some massive secret hoard of Merovingian or Templar gold.
He was actually deeply in debt.
Deeply. He was a charlatan who lived beyond his means, overspending his ill-gotten gains right up until the end of his life. He died living a lie of manufactured wealth.
Okay, so if the wealth came from fraud, we absolutely have to address the key source material for the bloodline, those two infamous parchments.
Yes, and experts state definitively that these documents are forgeries.
How can we know that with such certainty?
Because the forgers, Pierre Plantard and Philippe de Cherizet, made critical modern mistakes that no medieval monk could possibly have made. We can state authoritatively that these parchments were created in the 1960s to retroactively lend credibility to the Priory of Sion hoax.
Let's start with the textual analysis, the anachronism. The Latin text of the Great Parchment, supposedly this centuries-old medieval text,
was copied from a specific chapter of the Gospel of St. John. But researchers didn't stop there. They traced the precise version of the Latin text that was used.
Now what do they find?
The sources confirmed the text was copied verbatim from an edition of the Novum Testamentum published in Oxford in 1889.
Let me get this straight. The document was supposedly discovered by Sauniere in 1891.
Right.
So it's impossible for it to be a centuries-old medieval text discovered before the source text it was copied from was even published.
It's a clear, unassailable timeline failure. A smoking gun of forgery.
And the method of encryption also confirms its modern, sophisticated origin.
It does. The complex cipher used to scramble that 128-letter message, the one that yields the Dagobert II reference. It wasn't a simple replacement cipher.
What was it then?
It used sophisticated techniques defined by the 18th century mathematician Leonhard Euler in his 1759 paper on the Knight's Tour problem on a chessboard.
The Knight's Tour. That's a sequence of moves by a knight on a chessboard where every square is visited exactly once.
Exactly. Using this geometric, highly complex route mapping to encrypt a message proves a highly advanced recent construction. It could have existed in the medieval period or even in Sauniere's time without very specific academic expertise.
So the encryption itself is a clear signature of a modern scholar who is familiar with 18th century mathematical puzzles.
And the message itself. The Italian expert Stefano Bartesaghi described the decoded French phrase with the wonderful word raccoglitisce,
which
cobbled together, randomly scraped up. It was entirely arbitrary. It lacked clear sense because it was simply an anagram chosen to recycle Roman numerals and letters from the original source texts, the epitaph Sauniere found, to fit the predetermined narrative Plantard required.
It was designed to sound mysterious, not to convey a real historical secret.
Precisely.
The symbolic argument is one of the most compelling for believers, though. So let's revisit the cryptic decorations Sauniere installed, the demon, the inscription, the statues. Do these symbols truly confirm a dark secret?
When we place these symbols back into their proper political and historical context, the mystery it dissolves into political commentary.
Okay, take the Latin inscription, Terribilis est locus, over the entrance.
While proponents translate this to the melodramatic, "this place is terrible," the historical context for its use in churches is far different.
The phrase is taken directly from the book of Genesis, chapter 28, where Jacob wakes up from his dream of the ladder to heaven.
And he says, "How dreadful is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven."
So Terribilis est locus isn't a dark curse. It's an entirely natural inscription, meaning this place is awesome, in the sense of the awe-inspiring presence of God.
It's standard church rhetoric for the 19th century, completely normal.
But what about the truly shocking statue of the demon Asmodeus kneeling beneath the holy water font? That seems impossible to explain away as standard decor.
It's startling, I agree, but it's not esoteric. We have to remember Sauniere's political leanings.
He was a fervent monarchist.
And he utterly despised the rise of French republicanism and its secularizing tendencies. The sources reveal he used his church decorations as a form of political commentary.
In one of his sermons, he actually stated that the Republicans were
the devil to be conquered, and who needs to bend its knee under the weight of religion and baptisms.
So the demon Asmodeus kneeling beneath the baptismal font is Sauniere's symbolic representation of secular, godless republicanism being defeated.
And forced to submit to the church and its sacraments.
It's an anti-republican political statement disguised as religious art.
Exactly. Not the guardian of Solomon's temple. Once you know Sauniere's rabidly conservative politics, the symbol makes perfect sense as propaganda.
And the elaborate reading of the saint statues to spell out Grail.
That requires taking huge arbitrary leaps of faith. You have to force the alignment. You have to borrow a letter from a different section of the church, as we noted.
It's a classic example of apophenia.
Finding patterns where none exist, driven by the pre-existing desire to prove the Grail, is the bloodline. Legitimate scholarship finds zero evidence that Sauniere installed them with any kind of cryptographic intent. The symbols that seem so suggestive only make sense if you start with a conclusion from the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, and then work backward to find them.
Finally, we have to confront the central claim that academic biblical scholars support the idea that Jesus married Mary Magdalene and established a bloodline.
And the simple truth is, they don't. This claim is rejected across the board by mainstream scholarship.
Proponents primarily rely on the non-canonical Gospel of Philip, a 3rd century Gnostic text.
They emphasize the reference to Mary Magdalene as Jesus' companion, or syzygos, and the line that he used to kiss her, often on her mouth.
This is presented as literal proof of marriage.
The key here is the dating and the context. The Gospel of Philip dates from the 3rd century. That's 150 to 200 years after the earliest New Testament writings.
And more importantly, it's a Gnostic text.
Gnostics spoke in allegory, in mysticism, in complex codes that were designed to describe spiritual union, not physical history.
So what is the Gnostic interpretation of syzygos?
In Gnosticism, syzygos refers to a spiritual counterpart, a complementary soul. Mary Magdalene is often interpreted within these Gnostic traditions as representing divine wisdom, or Sophia.
So when Jesus is described as kissing her,
scholars interpret this as a symbolic communication of spiritual knowledge and revelation, not a literal act of physical intimacy. James M. Robinson, a key editor of the Nag Hammadi text, is absolutely clear. There is no historical or early textual evidence supporting Jesus being married.
But the argument often pivots back to Jewish cultural norms, saying Jesus must have been married because virtually all Jewish men in that era were.
That argument also fails when we look at the immediate context of the early church. The writings of Paul, which were composed within 20 years of the crucifixion, are incredibly telling.
How so?
Paul mentions that prominent early church leaders, specifically Peter and James, had wives. He knew and was aware of their marital status. Yet in all of his detailed descriptions of Jesus, his family, and his followers, he never once mentions a wife for Christ.
This powerful absence of comment,
despite mentioning his contemporaries' married lives, strongly suggests the historical Jesus was not married.
So the evidence for the bloodline thesis boils down to a literal interpretation of a metaphorical, non-canonical text written centuries after the fact, which runs counter to the established historical and contemporary accounts.
That's it, exactly. The claim is romantic, it's empowering, and it's challenging to the established patriarchy of the church, which is why it has such appeal, but it is simply not historically supported by the sources we have.
We have established that Sauniere's wealth came from mass trafficking fraud, the documents were 1960s forgeries, and the theological claim rests on a misreading of Gnosticism.
And yet the story remains immensely popular.
Whoa, why is such a thoroughly debunked hoax so sicky? What does the conspiracy offer the believer that the simple historical truth that the priest was a successful charlatan does not?
I think the primary psychological reward is the profound desire for a sacred royal bloodline.
The Merovingian myth, as it was reinterpreted by the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, it provides this compelling counter-narrative to the Catholic Church's history of papal succession, which is rooted in Peter.
Exactly. Instead of a succession based on authority handed down, you have a succession based on biology, the superior right of the body. It links Christian faith to temporal power and gives an elevated status to a particular royal European dynasty.
It also feeds into this deep-seated desire to feel like one of the initiated.
Absolutely. The ability to decode the cryptic symbols in Sauniere's church and the ciphers in the Parchments gives the believer the powerful psychological reward of possessing secret knowledge.
They aren't just consumers of history. They're participants who can read the subtle truths hidden from the uninitiated masses.
It's a huge hook. In a world that's filled with confusing information overload, the conspiracy offers a clear, hidden order. It suggests history isn't random. It's being orchestrated by powerful hidden players protecting this sublime truth.
And we can't entirely dismiss that initial spark, can we? Sauniere did find some artifacts.
He did. Old stones, perhaps some Visigothic coins, the Carolingian Knight stone. He found things when he renovated the church. And this genuine minor ambiguity keeps the fantasy of a massive treasure alive.
The imagination fills the vacuum left by the lack of documentation with fantasies of Templar gold or Solomon's treasure.
And the Priory of Sion succeeded as a literary hoax because it offered the ultimate narrative element. A secret cabal led by historical superstars like Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and Isaac Newton.
It implies that history has been manipulated by a shadow government, which gives life a thrilling, hidden narrative arc.
And we have to return to the architect of this specific narrative, Pierre Plantard, who confirmed the entire operation was based on calculated deception.
He was forced to admit under judicial oath in 1993, during an investigation into the Palat affair, that he had entirely fabricated the Priory of Sion narrative.
And why? To truly become an influential figure in esoteric and French monarchist circles, it was, from start to finish, a confidence trick designed for self-aggrandizement.
Beyond the codes and the cash, the conspiracy taps into a powerful spiritual yearning for something many feel has been missing in Western Christianity.
The feminine aspect of divinity.
Yes.
That's a crucial point. The elevation of Mary Magdalene to the status of Christ's wife and the sacred vessel, the Grail, provides a compelling, empowering counter-narrative to the historically male-dominated, patriarchal Catholic Church.
It's a spiritually romantic idea, isn't it? That the true history was hidden, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too beautiful or too empowering to the feminine spirit.
And the Church's documented history of suppressing Gnostic texts and promoting the image of a celibate Jesus provides the perfect narrative villain. It creates fertile ground for the counterclaim of a hidden marriage.
It allows believers to feel they are correcting a profound historical injustice.
In short, the conspiracy offers far more than the truth does. The truth is that a priest was a small-time crook. The myth is that you are an initiate of a secret society protecting the sacred royal bloodline of Christ. The choice is clear in terms of psychological fulfillment.
So we started this journey with a genuine historical riddle. Why did a poor priest get rich?
And we followed that small truth through decades of calculated fabrication, a hotel marketing stunt, a monarchist hoaxer, and a final brilliant synthesis in the 1980s that created a modern sacred myth.
A myth based on a misreading of a cipher copied from an 1889 Bible.
The truth of Sauniere's life is that he was a charlatan who died deeply in debt from selling masses he never performed. The myth of the Priory of Sion lives on because of the powerful psychological rewards it offers.
So here is the thought to ponder as you reflect on all this.
We know the lie. The Priory of Sion was created for personal gain and acknowledged by its creator as a complete fabrication. If a hoax built on a mountain of fraud and forgery can inspire a spiritual movement that offers millions a profound sense of purpose, secret knowledge, and an empowering connection to an alternative divine history, does the verifiable truthfulness of the content truly matter as much as its profound psychological impact on the believer?
What truth are you willing to accept and why? Let us know what stands out to you. That's it for this time on Conspiracy Deconstructed.